Welcome everybody to this session, which is going to be focused on revenue enablement. I am really excited because of the panelists that we're bringing today. And so not only want to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with us, but also want to thank our panelists for taking their time and bringing their expertise. And I'm Paul Butterfield. I am the CEO of Revenue Flywheel Group. And Steph, why don't we start with you? Introduce a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our group. We're here to entertain and hopefully inform you today. I'm Stephanie White, Senior Director of Revenue Enablement at Loopio.
Terry?
Oh, great. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Terry Long, VP of Global Enablement at MindTickle. Looking forward to our session.
How about Melody?
Yes, what's going on, everyone? My name is Melody Schwartz. I'm the VP of Enablement and Operations here at Spiff. Thank you so much for joining. We're pumped to continue this conversation around enablement and all the good things. So I'm pumped. Thank you for having us.
Last but not least, all right, I'm on it. Hi, everyone. I'm Whitney Seek. I'm Vice President of Revenue Enablement at Demandbase. And I think this is going to be an awesome conversation today. This is such a fun group and such expertise in the field of enablement. So I'm excited to learn from all of you.
Let's jump right in then. This is a topic that is so hot right now. I want to start with this. How has the charter or the realm of enablement evolved with modern sales challenges? And I want to start off with you on this one, Steph.
So I think it's interesting because we can talk about charter and what our day-to-day work actually looks like. And at least for myself and a number of folks that I speak to, in 2022, it was a lot of how fast can you onboard? How quick are they hitting ramp? How many tools can you implement and drive high adoption really quickly? But then coming into 2023 was a very distinct shift. And it's a lot more focused now on pipe generation and win rates and retention. And even though we all hate to say it, because we all say don't do tactical enablement, with RIFs and reprioritization of organizational structures does come some tactical work that a lot of us were trying to steer clear of last year. And so I find there is quite a shift as we're thinking about particularly small, mid-sized SaaS companies. How are we pivoting to support the sales team, which has potentially restructured in the last 6 months, and what our business needs the most from us now as there's fewer opportunities, so every deal matters more than ever.
You know, it's interesting. I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I agree with you that tactics are definitely here to stay. My experience is even with a great strategic strategy that's focused on revenue and all those things, without the right tactics, you're not going to make any progress against it anyway. So I'm curious, Mel, what are you seeing?
You know, I totally agree with Stephanie. I think being really excellent at the tactical execution is the recipe that makes up really great efficiency. And as much as we don't want to admit it, it's true. I think if you want to be efficient at a high level, you have to be very, very good at putting one foot in front of the other. I will also say on the same note on around efficiency, I'm finding that more enablers have to think like operators. So if you want to buy a new technology, if you want to implement a new training program, if you want to make a minor change, you really have to not only continue to sell your team on it, but you have to prove that there's going to be a meaningful outcome at the beginning of your conversations. And I think there's a little bit of Captain Obvious. We kind of already knew that was the case, but if you're listening to this and you're about to walk into a meeting, just heads up, best practice. You might want to just think about proving the outcome and a positive outcome early on in those conversations.
I think the summary here is like, we've been moving from a situation where we were growth at all costs to where there's a real focus on predictable pipeline and profitability, right? And with that type of change, efficiency is the name of the game. I think that's a theme here too. But I want to be a little bit of a contrarian. I think we can move away from some of the tactical traditions of enablement, by elevating which tactics we're focusing on and making multipliers out of our manager enablement. So by focusing on manager enablement specifically, you're actually able to do more with less, is the phrase that we're all used to hearing. And so I think that's going to be a big trend coming into this year too, is that enablers are going to be creating deliverables, but they're going to be doing it at the manager level instead of, or more often than, at the individual contributor level.
I was waiting to see if anybody brought up a transition to what I like to call customer journey enablement. There are different phrases for it. I know y'all have opinions on that. Who wants to go talk about that?
I'll jump in, Paul. I do have a very strong opinion on that. I do think we've moved away from, definitely sales enablement has moved into revenue enablement very intentionally. We're on a revenue journey, not just on a sales journey. And understanding that it's a continuum and the customer journey actually starts during prospecting. That extends all the way through the close of the deal, all of the professional services, expanding, et cetera. And so we need to be looking at it from that lens as enablers and ensuring that whether it's during the onboarding process, the everboarding process, or while we're working with the CS teams or the BDRs or AEs, we're always thinking about what that experience is like for the customer and whether or not our sellers are actually able to elevate the conversation in such a way that it is going to contribute to revenue goals. That's a different type of enablement, at least in my experience. And I think going back to your first question, just from a data point, 1999, when enablement actually evolved into what is now enablement, back then it was more of a, as Paul and I know, is more of just training and development. But it was all about butts and seats. It was about how much content can you curate and put in front of sellers. And it was very much focused just on the front end sellers. So that evolution has happened. The shift in how people are segmented, the competencies, the deliverables from the CS team, all of that has now shifted. And so with that transition, the expansion of our roles has to adapt.
And there's a spotlight on the post-sale side too, Terry. I completely agree with the value that you're seeing in that shift to revenue enablement. We're looking at customer acquisition costs being so high. So now there's more of a focus on retaining and growing your customer base,
right,
than there has been. And I think that that's really a big part of this shift too, is now we're focusing not only on sales, but on post-sales and all of those touch points along that journey.
Right.
I think one of the other elements, since we're going down this path, we go off script within 10 minutes, everybody, here we go, is also thinking about the impact of mergers and acquisitions. So there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the last 12 months. And so if you're in a SaaS business, you may not have felt it right away because perhaps you're on a 12 or 24-month contract. Now your contracts are coming up for renewal and suddenly tighter budgets, you're starting to feel this quarter. Acquisitions are starting to hit you now. And it's starting to think through not just how do we swarm sell to retain a customer when that's happened, but how can we start thinking about tools, methods, processes, and conversations to get the heads up of when those things are going to happen. You don't want to find out the day that a publicly traded company announces they've been acquired. Ideally, you've been picking up on small red flags in the 1 to 2 weeks at least prior. Sometimes easier said than done, but I think more enablers are now trying to have the conversations internally to say, do we have trackers set up? Are we getting, this is a little old school, but do we have Google alerts in place? Are we setting triggers on our customers in LinkedIn so that we can start to catch key activities and things that they're suddenly commenting on that could give us any indication that change is on the horizon so that we can get ahead of either the risk of a customer being acquired or, if they're the acquirer, the potential opportunity that we want to act on fast to oust the competitor from the other company.
Preach, Stephanie. I think that's such a smart way to look at this too. And I think the other side to that is that's looking at the external customer landscape. Even internally, we're seeing those same pressures around platforms and focusing on our tech stack consolidation and getting pushback from our finance team on our renewals, and are we negotiating the same way with our vendors the way that they are with us? And so yeah, I'm seeing that on both sides of the table there. Being an enablement leader, you get to see both sides of the coin for how our customers are reacting as well as how we're being treated internally.
What a great segue, Whitney. So let's move in to talk about that. Everybody here, I'm sure, has tools that are indispensable to the way that you're running your business and the way that you're enabling your teams. So I want to start with you on this one, Terry. What are those critical tools? And tell us a little bit about how you build your tech stack or look at it.
Well, I think MindTickle is in a unique position because we are an end-to-end enablement platform. So from a revenue productivity platform perspective, it's all about us drinking our own champagne. So looking at it end to end, how are we preparing all of our sellers? What are we putting in front of them? How are we providing them the right kind of insight so that they can make those decisions proactively, like Stephanie's talking about, take action? How are we actually connecting with our customers in the digital sales room? How are we creating that experience for them, providing the visibility that they need and really tightening that engagement? And then really where this transition is going with enablement, how are we providing the kind of data insights and curating that with the right kind of data sets to tell the story? And I think regardless if you have one platform or 5 platforms or even more, there's a couple different data points around that. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Deloitte at the conference we were just at, Paul, that talked about, it was 5 to 7, I think, was where things started to get a little bit hairy within organizations. And I would say from my previous experience at other organizations, it is incredibly difficult, not only as an enablement leader, but from my perspective, in those situations where you're trying to tell the right story of revenue impact, and more importantly, create some predictability in your motion. When you're trying to curate 5 different systems and tell a story, none of the data matches. And so it's very, very difficult. And we are in a unique position. And I would say, me personally, because all of those data sets live together. So it's a little bit easier. But I think when you're curating that, you really need to think about what that journey is like, not only for, again, the seller, but what's the journey for the customer? How does the customer engage along that entire path? Because if you miss that, you're missing the critical element. And we all know it's a lot more, it costs us a lot more to acquire a new customer or to retain our old customers.
Probably everybody that's watching right now knows what a digital sales room is, but just in case, would you just give a brief description?
Yeah. So if you think about it, a digital sales room is nothing different than what you're experiencing here, where it is essentially a repository of, it's an experience that we're creating, where we're sending over a link that has been prescriptively curated for that customer, where they can go in and experience something along the lines of content that's very relatable to what they've discussed. It could be proposals. And even more importantly, it gives them an opportunity to engage virtually in chat rooms, to extend invitations to other people in the organizations that maybe were not able to be a part of those conversations. So really, it's digital sales room is a virtual experience that is living and breathing and evolving as the customer goes through that journey with you. So it over time can build and change, but it is unique to them and really helps tell the kind of story that they need to tell internally as they're looking to evolve their relationship with you.
Thanks. Stephanie, you also work for a company that's a tool company. You sell a tool, but very different than Terry. So how are you looking at it?
So revenue enablement for my team oversees supporting our sellers, so BDRs, SDRs, AEs, and key accounts folks, as well as our customer success managers. But the other pillar that I have that I think an increasing number of enablement leaders are starting to have is proposals. We also, of course, drink our own champagne, as we all need to become experts in our own product. The proposal response function at Lupio lives under me. And the beauty of that is we talk about aligning to the customer journey and the customer lifecycle. When we support teams from MQL through SQL, through SAO, through qualified opportunity, all the way through to retention and renewal, including the RFPs that when a customer is renewing, we're seeing increasing numbers of people going back out to bid at the end of their contract. What you said this, right? We're all under pressure with our own vendors and providers to negotiate different deals and rates. We're seeing more and more people go to RFP at the end of a contract. Even those that don't are now doing more security questionnaires as cyber threats are increasing. And so where you used to see some of these questionnaires coming from your customers once every couple of years, and maybe suddenly it's now every 12 months. And trying to get access to that information, and in our case, it's Lupio, so that we can start to get ahead of that cycle with our marketing team and give them insights. Hey, we've noticed this trend. Companies in this segment or this geography that are going to bid, we're seeing this happen. That allows us to get smarter all the way through the sales cycle, which is huge. So we drink our own champagne. Other tools that I cannot live without now that I've had them, spoiled, can't give them up now. Video. I love video. It does not matter whether you are using a Loom or a Vidyard. My personal preference is Vidyard. Great team over there. Being able to communicate with your customers in video at their schedule and their convenience to humanize the sales process is key. Conversational intelligence. We need to be able to listen to our sellers' calls. We need to be able to analyze the sentiment and help give them feedback as quick to real time as possible in a way that's scalable. And then, a content management system, Terry mentioned, MindTickle has that functionality, as well as an LMS. Being able to actually automate the distribution of my training content to all of my sellers and have automated reminders. And even better, some of these platforms have coaching built into them is incredible. Suddenly, the fact that I may not be able to get an extra headcount this year is taken care of by value add of some of the new functionality rolling out in existing SaaS products that I already have for no additional cost. So those are really 5 things. Can't give up Lupio, video, CI, CMS, and LMS, just to round out those acronyms for you, Paul.
And Paul, I know Whitney and Melody are going to respond, but I really want to reinforce what Stephanie said. I think to your point, Stephanie, conversational intelligence and coaching are the 2 things that are going to continue to transform this entire industry over the next several months. And if you are not, I think, Whitney, you said this, if you're not using your managers as force multipliers, you need to start doing that. And coaching is the perfect way to partner that with your conversational intelligence. And you have such a strong opportunity.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think with conversational intelligence, y'all have hit the nail on the head for some of the most popular use cases. The other one that I want to add into the mix that I think is interesting is with all the market shifts, it's also important to keep a pulse on customer feedback that comes through the conversational intelligence tools. So listening to your customers, surfacing those trends to your product organization, to your PMM team, to adjust messaging in real time, to be able to get the team that quick flex based on what's happening in market is really critical right now in a way that you had a little bit longer to navigate that in the past. And then I would add to the mix, one that I haven't heard us talk much about is whatever you're using for prospecting right now, where pipeline is the name of the game, we are really focusing on how do we get more pipeline in the door. So I think that's another tool in the sales tech stack. And then I think just to bring it back to enablement, we have the responsibility to make our tools indispensable. We have to drive internal adoption of those. So I've got someone on my team who manages tools and analytics, and she builds out these maturity models for our core tech stack to help drive adoption with action plans that are achievable quarter over quarter with our role specific audiences. And I just think that's the right move for not just turning on tools and forgetting them, but really investing internally in the technology you're purchasing.
I'll do one quick plug. So before we jump to the next question. So one of the things that I really believe has been a huge asset. Well, first of all, I'll double click. I agree with Stephanie. I think proposal management is going to come back with a vengeance because our buyers are more strapped for time and resources than ever. And I think they're going to go to RFP faster. We're seeing it for prospects. We're seeing it for customers. So I couldn't agree with you more on that front. The other thing I will say is that if you don't regularly attend the leadership forecasting meetings, you should. You should be really familiar with the technology that your leaders live in and day out. So every Monday morning, I attend a forecasting meeting. I'm very familiar with our current tool. And I often use screenshots and data from that tool at the beginning of my enablement sessions to prove why we're in the session that day. So if you feel like you need to be more comfortable with forecasting, the language, the motion, the cycles, the technology, I really encourage you to lean into that. It's going to be a great asset for you as an enabler.
I think we've all worked at least one place where a strategy is rolled out. It might be corporate, it might just be within the revenue org. And then 6 months later, nobody can quite tell you what it was. So execution is key. What are you seeing? I'll start with you on this one, Whit. How are you and your team bridging that gap between the strategy and results?
Yeah. Well, I know that some people have used this term before, but I love the made up word of stratacution. I think that it's really what I love most about being in enablement, because we sit at this intersection of strategy and execution, and we are agents of change that help with transformational opportunities within the revenue org. And we orchestrate all those motions the best way. And the best way to do that is tactically. We have to really start with the end in mind. And so this is where I think you like partner with your operations team, you look at the leading indicators, and you map back to the skills that really move the needle. And so we may find that if we're like truly helping to drive the right solution and not just reacting to the needs of the business, that might not always be training, right? Like it could be something that's more operational in nature, something like process automation, or it could be something more organizational in nature, something like adding in an overlay rep with technical expertise instead of having to enable the entire field on a new product launch. So I just think that there's like a really cool creativity element that comes out of the role that enablement has in the business.
Anybody else? We're ready to move on. Cool. Product enablement. Everybody needs it. Nobody likes it. I'm speaking as a former sales rep and sales leader. Let's put it that way. Not talking about enablement, folks, so much. And I think there's some reasons for that. And so let's start with you this time, Melody. How do you keep reps up to date with that right mix of product enablement that they can engage with and use?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think there's a couple of basic pillars you need to have in place, and then there's some activities around it. So the first pillar you need to have in place is you need to be constantly educating your product team around how to work with enablement. You need to help them understand that action or missing action has a result when they pass the baton to you. And you have to be really assertive and clear in that conversation, because once the baton gets passed to you, you need to be set up to be successful. And so it's educating your product team. The second thing is that I think we all would agree, defining, and I think we've kind of loosely discussed this, defining basic competency levels for product knowledge. Your basic, your intermediate, your advanced. So you've got some sort of a roadmap to manage to. I'm a really big fan of the tiering process. So you've got some sort of roadmap to educate your internal stakeholders. I will also say that I think we should be prepared for a world where we have continuous releases. I think oftentimes it causes friction internally, but if you look at the positive side of that and lean into it, it's a really great thing. You just got to be prepared for it. So you have to be prepared for continuous releases. The way that we do that is we push our product enablement through our weekly AE and SC pod meetings. I'm not really sure what your go-to-market model is, but I imagine there's some sort of meeting that happens between your territory team or your AEs, your SDRs each week. Having your technical team push that through is a way to do it. The other thing that we do is we have monthly subject matter expert roundtables where we bring product directly to the sales team. So that way, I am giving my sellers the best information, the most up-to-date information, and I'm doing it quickly as well. So you've got some of the more traditional framework, but I think, for me, I really focus on leaning into those continuous releases and getting that to the field really quickly. Is it a popular opinion? No, but it's my job to make sure that my sellers have what they need at any time, and I stand by that. So I hope that's helpful. little spicy there. I hope that's okay.
I'm going to piggyback on what Melody said because we're doing something similar. When I came on board in May, there was product release enablement, and it's a monthly cadence. But what we found right away is it was so robust, it was so technical, laborious, that sellers were lost, customer success was lost in no time. And we ended up really integrating enablement, to your point, Melody, integrating enablement with product marketing, our product technical team. And we helped standardize how the communication was going to be delivered, inclusive of starting out with why. So we completely flipped the script with, why is this change happening? What is the impact to the customer or to me personally, the seller? And why should I care? So we could make sure that they really were bought in first. And then we've continued to iterate on those, that number one, that cadence, the communication, to the extent that we're building out all of these micro videos that really in 30 seconds to a minute highlight what those product changes are, because we also need to get that in front of our customers and our customer success team. And so making sure our customer success team is armed with that before it's released to the public has also been a key obstacle that we've had to overcome, so that our CS team and our PS team doesn't end up on the defense saying, I didn't know that that was happening.
All right.
So I physically cringe when we talk about product enablement, not because I don't love to do it, but because I feel like, personal opinion, maybe a little spicy, I'm just going to stay on trend here, there is an increasing number of companies that were on a quarterly or monthly model for significant releases. So if we think, tier 1 is market changing, tier 2 is competitive changing, tier 3, tier 4, right? That are gone from big impacts every quarter. Then for a hot minute this spring, it was like, we're going to do it every month because we need to be more competitive, and maybe numbers weren't what they needed to be. To now it's like, okay, every 2 weeks we have something. And by the way, enablement teams may have shrunk. RevOps is also pushing through changes. You're also trying to support in the training of customer success teams and your solutions folks getting up to speed, and just trying to stay on top of the volume of change. You lose the ability to do your reinforcement training, which we all know is the golden rule. Don't train and walk away. But when your product releases are on top of one another, it makes it very, very difficult to be able to give that full manager coaching kit for reinforcement handoff. And so, making sure that you're tiering your releases with your product team, and really defining the threshold and being so deliberate about what constitute this needing to go through enablement. I have an intake form. I think of a lot of enablement teams do. I am particularly harder on my product marketing team when they send me a request. Why? Well, if it's not ready in a demo instance, if we don't have the full functionality in beta, at least to be able to get enablers up to speed, how are we going to effectively communicate and train our go-to-market teams on that? And then the last thing I would say is my rule of thumb is always, is this awareness? Is this competency? Or is this in-depth product knowledge? Train to the minimum you need to. Do not train someone to a competency level if all they need to know is that it exists. Every minute in training is a minute not selling. So being very, very deliberate with who's coming in and to what level of training. I'll get off
and
my
what time in the quarter you're delivering it. I know that may sound obvious, but I've seen that be a miss sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, we've all heard the expression practice makes perfect. And I don't remember where I heard this. It was a keynote somewhere where they said it's actually perfect practice makes perfect, which I thought was an interesting difference. But it can be a challenge sometimes to create a space where people are comfortable practicing. It's constructive, they can get feedback and really get some hands-on time doing it. Whitney, do you agree that's a challenge? And if so, how are you addressing it?
It's a challenge and it's an important one. And I think it ties back to what Steph was just saying around like cringing at the volume of change, right? Like we're in this world where enablement is constantly getting pressure to launch, 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 launch. And so one thing that my team has done to help mitigate that is we've instituted a strategy around what we're calling the enablement flywheel, where we launch, we reinforce, and we sustain. If you are actually looking to drive change, you need to have like best practices in change management for how you're launching a program. Are you changing hearts and minds and ensuring that the desire for change is there first before you educate the field? Are you creating the space to practice and for managers to learn how to coach to this concept alongside their teams, giving them that extra level of education prior to their field finding out about it? And then are you able to sustain that? Are you able to put that into the right part of the learning journey so that new hires can get caught up to speed with the base? I think that really enacting that full flywheel, which I think falls nicely with your company's name, Paul, like shameless plug there. Yep, got you.
That was intentional.
Yeah. But I think that, in addition to having that strategy, ways that you execute on it are important too. Like we have a space that we call Open Gym, and it is a safe space for practice on what they just learned in the training sessions. And we give them a little bit of guidance, breakout rooms, peer-to-peer engagement, and some guidance on how to give good feedback to each other. The other side is managers deserve coaching guides. They deserve enablement deliverables like I was talking about earlier that help with this reinforcement effort to be a really productive and safe space, because a lot of managers move from super sellers to supervisors and they don't learn that coaching skill unless you're at a more sophisticated company that's already invested in that role. So those are some of my tips there.
So I think it's interesting. Sorry, Paul, I'm just going to jump right in. I think it's interesting because as we talk about manager enablement, I mean, that's a whole other topic. High performing ICs getting promoted to sales leadership. We'll park that one. But it is really critical. And I think one of the challenges that we sometimes have, depending on individual companies, is, well, I'm trying to close deals and help my teams do that. I need enablement to just handle all the training. And it's such a lost opportunity where managers who, spoiler, were likely high-performing ICs and still have that kind of hero complex, live in the deals instead of living in the strategy. And that is a big miss for me. I love Whit's points and I love the open gym concept. One of the things that I like to leverage is tech. Listen, everybody's schedules are different. Calendars look like dumpster fires in some instances. Mine certainly does most days. So how can you leverage technology that you already have for feedback and insights? There are LMSs out there right now that have in beta or in full launch AI feedback, where we have it in ours. It's Leslie, and I have it activated so I can create a practice space. So Paul, let's say we've done a training and your manager is going to be meeting with you weekly to reinforce how you're leveraging the new service package that you can sell. But we create this practice space where you can actually record on your screen, and it's going to give you real-time feedback based on how frequently you're taking pauses, filler words, the confidence in your voice. But I can also program it to listen for key things, phrases that you should be saying and phrases that you shouldn't. The beauty of that is you get real-time feedback, and it's not at the cost of me also then reviewing it as a human and giving you more subjective and more comprehensive coaching feedback. Finding that balance of volume of one-to-one people time versus giving you extra time and space to practice, I think is so important. So leverage technology where you can.
I'm going to triple down on what you said, Stephanie. We are at a point in time where we have to figure out how to scale. We cannot expect our managers to do everything. We can't expect ourselves to do anything. And so technology has to step in. And so similar to you, We engage and we use coaching forms. We use AI to help coach us on those coaching forms. We use the conversational intelligence. We use the themes, all of those. And those are great force multipliers. And they also can give you great insights, especially when they aggregate all of that information and provide you summary feedback, and actually provide the sellers a summary feedback so they understand without you having to get involved every single time. You've set up the system so those definitions, the rubric, the objectives, those guardrails are already in there. That also gives them that safe zone. And I think that's going back to what Whitney was saying, which is psychologically, they do need to have a safe space to do some of this because it makes them feel very vulnerable. And the coaching aspect of that in those rooms allows them to have that. So I love it. I love that Mind Tickle can do that for our sellers as well. It gives them that great flexibility.
Let's talk about emotional intelligence. Compared to so many of the skills that we've been talking about, we all deal with day to day, it's a pretty squishy one, at least in my experience. How are you finding success in helping the teams you support develop EQ? And what are the benefits that you're seeing from doing that? Mel, can we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I'll bring us back to the beginning of this panel where we talked about conversational intelligence. Conversational intelligence is your friend when it comes to exercises to facilitate active learning or active listening, and also building out EQ. So I'll give you one of my favorites. Two people listen to a call and individually you both take notes and you talk about what's in the call. You talk about what's different, what you heard, and then why did you hear what you heard. With EQ, everyone knows it's important, but you really need to have that open gym time, that safe space to facilitate. In my opinion, this one should be done live, facilitate an exercise on active listening and ensuring that you are making the seller aware of how they respond in certain situations. I will also say this is where manager enablement comes into play. Our two sales leaders here just did a learning huddle and we talked about layering. And our director of mid-market so intelligently talked about layering is like lasagna. And so to boost, yeah, there you go, I was hungry. So to boost emotional intelligence, you have to think about maybe an image or an exercise or something to help that emotional intelligence kick in when you need it. So there's exercises, there's hand holding, but then there's also really the managers are on board when you start to facilitate the training with your team.
I love that, Mel. And I think the other way that I found success with this at previous organizations was we did a workshop around design thinking, where we had reps look at the sales process and the sales stages and take a persona-based approach of establishing empathy for the buyer, looking at what are they thinking, feeling, saying, doing, what pressure are they receiving internally from their corporations, from their business during all of this when they're going through this evaluation. And then other things like we do a lot of personality tests for our internal teams, right? And understanding ourselves at the workplace. But also we need to understand and apply that same learning to our customers. So if you're doing like DISC assessments or crystal nose or Enneagram, like how can you flip that learning to not just be about yourself, but also inform you about how to flex to the needs of your customers from a personality style? I think all of that really boils up into some of that emotional intelligence.
Anybody else? It's a good topic.
I'll jump in on the topic. I wouldn't say we're at a point where we've really spent time working with the field on this one. But back to your point again, Whitney, and I think Melody alluded to this. The safe space is huge. Having empathy for the sellers, helping the sellers understand what empathy is and how to have empathy for their customers and what the buyer journey is like is huge. And so what I would say, while we're not calling it EI at this point in time, one of the things that you can do in onboarding to start introducing that is ensuring that anybody coming into the company is actually going through a customer success experience first, versus starting out with, well, what's the product? What's my sales process? They actually spend a week or two really understanding what are our customers' experience, what's the journey, et cetera, because that's where the empathy starts coming into play that they can put into practice. I would say it's critically important. I know there's a billion studies out there at this point in time that can quantify that for everyone. So I would say it's a necessary aspect of what needs to be programmed moving forward into enablement.
Before I was in enablement, for those who don't know, I had a much longer career in sales. And my first tech sales job was at HP. And I mention that because I'll never forget my manager. She was amazing. Sandy Waller, probably retired by now. But she told me, welcome to tech. Now you live in dog years. I don't think dog years are fast enough nowadays to even talk about it. So in that environment, how are you ensuring that, the teams you're supporting make the time or even have the time to engage in continuous learning and continuously adapt? Terry, do you want to start with that one? You spent a lot of time in that, I know.
How do you ensure it? You start from the top. You need to have a conversation with the executive leadership team, and you need to, one, have an executive leadership team that buys into the theory. They need to buy into the practice of it, buy into helping to drive and carve out that time. There needs to be just a genuine understanding and respect that whether it's an hour a week, whether it's 2 hours, depending again on your organization, your size of the team, the complexity of your product, that needs to be woven into just the nature of your business. And if it's not driven from just the culture perspective, it's going to be really hard for enablement to sell that. And that's unfortunate. So I think that's how you do it. And then you need to make sure that as an enablement leader, you help tell the story and you showcase how it's actually impacting the revenue for the organization, the productivity of the team, all of those elements, whether it's how they're performing, how much more comfortable they are delivering the pitch. You pick which piece of the metric you want to highlight, but you take that and you draw that whole feedback loop. And that's the story that needs to be told.
I love that, Terry. And I think to take that, to continue that thread of moving it from theory to application, one of the ways that we evaluate our enablement initiatives and requests that come through is on this 9 box that looks at what is the outcome that we're looking to see from a behavior change perspective? Like, do we expect that the entire field become masters of this? And then we balance that on what is the cognitive load associated with this initiative? Like, is this something that's a quick change that's not going to be too hard for the field to grasp? Or is this a totally new concept where we're going to have to walk them along that change that leadership's already been on that mission? And from the strategy side, we talk a lot about things behind the scenes, and then we smack the field in the face like a tsunami. So it's really important to look at it from, it's not an enablement capacity. It's not on enablement. Like, we're not the ones stressed about can we deliver on this? It's, can the reps consume it? And when leadership starts to look at it through that lens, like you described, they start to make more space for it. So I love that you're finding that approach helpful too.
I think it's interesting, Whit. This is one of the conversations I've had recently, which is, can we do it? Yes. Should we do it? No. And here's why. This particular segment or team has had 4 different trainings in the last 2 months. We've fundamentally changed qualification criteria for leads, and we've changed their trial process. 2 critical elements of, this employee's responsibility. Should we do it? Maybe from a revenue perspective or cost savings, we should, but from a people cost standpoint, the answer is no. What I would say, and shout out to Laura Wheeler if she's listening to this, we were joking around about, you got to mission impossible those micro learning moments, right? If we can't have the cognitive load or the calendar time of our learners to do significant initiatives, you got to sneak that in anywhere you can. One of the things that we do, so twofold with our BDRs. 1, we do a Hot Tip Tuesday. Can't take credit for that alliteration. That is somebody on my team. And it is a quick 2 to 3 minute consumable lesson that has video or a GIF involved. Why GIF? Well, the idea is it makes that load less. So if you make it humanized, when that hits on Tuesday, they expect it. This is the repetition. They know it's going to happen every Tuesday. And it makes it fun. It makes it more entertaining for them. So for that particular learning audience, it's great. The other thing I would say about that is, trying to find new and innovative ways. We can talk to sales development reps all day long about this is how you write a great email. But a great tip is actually take one of the emails that you've received as a prospect, put it in the Slack channel, and go round robin popcorn for people to break down whether that was a good or bad email, and let your BDR team decide if you should reply to that development rep that's trying to prospect you. It is amazing how they will process from each other in peer-to-peer learning and how they'll apply and surprise you with how they've picked up these little nuggets along the way. So I'd say just be creative, look for those micro learning moments, and really have that repetition where they come to expect that delivery format.
I worked with an amazing RevOps leader at one point, named Lisa Kelly, and she and I would get horrible emails, and we developed what we called the wall of shame. And we'd strip out personal information, but we do what you said. We'd kind of put that out there for reps to look at and hopefully learn from. So y'all ready for the speed round? Because that's where we're down to. All right. And it's a jump ball, so somebody start. But this has been amazing. I think we've all learned from each other, and I know I have at least. And so what is the number one key takeaway that you want people to have from this, or maybe that you have yourself? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in here. Look, you gotta be agile. The market's changing. There's new strategies. You're constantly juggling priorities. You're constantly juggling delivery mechanisms, audiences, opinions, attitudes, whatever that is. You've got to be agile and you've got to read the room. I will also just say the first vehicle to adoption is you. You have to be engaged. You have to have a great brand. You got to have fun. You got to believe in what you're doing. All of this starts with you. Is my speed round hot take.
I love that. I think just to play off of that, the phrase that came to mind is like a summary of this is like enablement's pretty meta. Like we sell internally. And so take a look at the market trends that you're helping the field with and think about how to apply those within your own strategy. So like look outward, but think inward.
That was good, Whit. I like it.
Yeah, it was.
I'm going to go 2 quick takeaways. One, so being agile, 100% Mel. I picture the Ross Geller in the stairwell moment with the couch where he's like, pivot. You are making life so much harder if you're not willing to look at the next step and pivot accordingly. It's one step at a time, folks. So look at the next step, not 10 flights up, one step at a time to know where you go next. And the other thing is just a little reminder, and I have to do this for myself sometimes too, is remember the beauty of enablement is that no 2 days are the same. And sometimes we need to go, oh, that's right. This is what I love about what I do. This is why I've chosen a dynamic profession where I'm in support of people. And no 2 days are the same. And that is exactly why I signed up for this. And I'm going to let this fuel me rather than drain me. So just remember, that's what we all signed up for. We're here to be dynamic and supportive.
Great.
I'll close out the round and I will say 2 things as well. Number 1, be curious. Always be curious. Always be asking questions. Melody said something about what did you get in trouble with as a kid at some point, I think in the backstage. It was because I talked too much and because I asked too many questions. And you know what? I maybe don't talk too much anymore, but I ask a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. Number 2, I would say prepare to win or lose to somebody who is. You got to be prepared. So preparedness is key.
Have you heard the Mike Tyson quote, Terry? Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face.
After that.
So definitely prepare, maybe even over prepare. I'll throw my own 2 cents in. And it's not necessarily directed exactly to what we've been talking about here, but I think it applies. And that is, as enablement folks, everybody I've ever worked with cares passionately about the success of the teams they support. And because of that, it could get really easy to get into the forest and get down on yourself because all you're seeing is the things that need to be done. Raise up above the trees once in a while, look back, and take the time to celebrate where you as an individual and the team that you're on has come from. It's easy to say, hard to do, but that's my 2 cents and takeaway that I would advise for everybody. I want to wrap up with a couple of things. First, I follow all 4 of you on social. And so to everybody that's watching that's not following all 4 of these folks, I recommend you go do it right away. They don't miss. And I think, Stephanie, one of the most interesting things is what you do, where you sometimes have I don't think you call it poke the bear, but that's what it makes me think of, right? Prod and look for what's wrong. I think that's really valuable. But in general, yeah, so much knowledge here, so much experience. Thank you, each of you, for taking the time to be here today. I've enjoyed it, and I'm for sure everyone else has. And for those of you that are watching, same thing. You had a lot of choices of where you could be and what you could be doing for this last hour. So thank you for choosing to spend it with us. And I think we uncovered some topics here for Team MSP that we need to come back and explore those in another series at a later time. Thanks and goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, ladies. Thanks, Paul.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
y'all.
Bye.